What's up, everyone? Welcome back. In today's video, we're going to talk about the death of Three Doors Down frontman Brad Arnold, who reportedly passed away from kidney cancer this past weekend at the young age of just 47. As always, in this video, we will discuss the fascinating numerology and synchronicity of this story. If you're watching this video archived, check the chapters down below if you'd like to jump down to any one of these sections. Of course, we'll be looking at the language of Gematria in this video and how it compares to dates on the calendar to decode this early demise. So what are we going to talk about here today? Well, of course, Brad Arnold was the lead singer of the popular 2000s rock group Three Doors Down. And Three Doors Down had a lot of hits, definitely not a one-hit wonder. But by far, their most popular song was Kryptonite, a 2000 rock single that launched the band into the mainstream. Now, Kryptonite is, of course, the element that can kill comic book legend Superman. And in 2025, just last year, the Superman franchise was rebooted on screen. Now, when the song Kryptonite was released in 2000, former Superman movie star Christopher Reeve was in a wheelchair as several years earlier, he suffered a fall off of a horse and was paralyzed for almost a decade before he died. Now, we're also going to talk about how this connects to the Super Bowl. Just think about the name Brad Darnold, right? His first name ends with a D, and then his last name is Arnold. The day after he died, quarterback Sam Darnold won the Super Bowl with the Seattle Seahawks. And Sam Darnold was born on June 5th. June 5th just happens to be the founding date of conservative organization Turning Point USA. And this is an important element of what we'll be discussing today, how this all connects back to Charlie Kirk. Turning Point was, of course, founded by Charlie Kirk, who was assassinated on September 10th of last year. And this brings us to another synchronicity, as his last name is Kirk, while Brad Arnold's middle name was Kirk. Kirk's first name was Charlie, and it just so happens that the man who sang the national anthem at the Super Bowl this year was also named Charlie. This is a huge part of what we'll be discussing today, as Arnold's full name has matching gematria with the National Anthem. You'll notice they both sum to 180 and 279 in reverse. This 279 is actually an important number to Brad Arnold, who was born on the 27th of September, or 27/9. The phrase the Jesuit order also sums to 279 with capital letters. The Jesuit order was founded on that same date, the 27th of September, and the Jesus Code is what we'll be looking at a lot today, because Brad Arnold passed away during Brown lunation number 1275. Using Latin gematria, 1275 is the value of Jesus Christ. In standard gematria, Jesus Christ equals 925. The date written 925, or September 25th, was the birthday of Christopher Reeve. Christopher, like Christ bearer. Furthermore, he was also born in the year 1952, which has the same digits as 925. When Christopher Reeve passed away back in 2004, it was 17,925 days after the birth of Pope Leo, the first ever pope of the Catholic Church to have been born in the United States. Leo's real name is Robert Francis Prevost. And this is quite intriguing because he replaced the first ever pope who used Francis as his papal name. And this is, of course, important to the Super Bowl because this year's Super Bowl, won by Sam Darnold, was held in the city of San Francisco. And San Francisco gets its name from Francis of Assisi, who was also the namesake of Pope Francis. And Pope Francis was the first ever pope to come from the Jesuit order. Now, in October of last year, Pope Leo was gifted a horse. And I made a post on this back in December as it was connected to the Greg Biffle plane crash, all synced up with the Gregorian calendar flip and the golden ratio. And this points us back to Christopher Reeve, because when Christopher Reeve became paralyzed in 1995, it was because he fell off of a horse. And on February 17th, a week from today, we start the Chinese Year of the Horse. Just look at how old Brad Arnold was when Christopher Reeve fell off the horse. He was exactly 200 months old. 200, the gematria of the winning quarterbacks, Samuel Richard Darnold and Sam Darnold, both 200. Superman's real name, Clark Kent, made his debut with Action Comics, which both also equal 200. And just think about it. Christopher Reeve died during the sign of Libra. Brad Arnold was born under the sign of Libra. And in astrology, Libra rules the kidneys. Well, Brad Arnold reportedly died of kidney cancer. So all of this is way more connected than any of us can possibly decode, but I'm going to do my best in this video. And I want to start with this number, the number 173. Because while Three Doors Down was not specifically a Christian band, Brad Arnold was very open about his faith, often speaking about it at concerts. And as I pointed out, his death is heavily linked to the Jesus Code. Now, in the book of Matthew, while Jesus is on the cross, he calls out for God, which translates to Eli, Eli. The name Eli is the number 173 flipped upside down. When Brad Arnold passed away, he was 17,300 days old. This is also an important number to the Jesuit order, whose motto is Ad Maiorem Dei Gloriam, which is Latin for the greater glory of God. In the alphabetic order, Ad Maiorem Dei Gloriam equals 173. Throughout this video, we will also explain how this story is synced up with the Yale Skull and Bones Sacrifice Code. Yale University turning 322 years old in 2023. And of course, this is all in accordance with the two skull and bones total eclipses over the United States. In reverse, Yale University equals 173. And Brad Arnold died a span of 17 weeks and 3 days after Yale's anniversary. Last year, the movie Superman hit theaters on the date July 11th in the United States. That was the date leaving 173 days in the year. And the man who played Superman in that movie, David Corenswet, he was exactly 1,700 weeks and 3 days old for Arnold's death. This year at the Super Bowl, the national anthem was sung by Charlie Puth, a name that has matching 173 gematria with the phrase National Anthem. Now, the National Anthem was written by Francis Scott Key. Notice how Key was born on the date August 1st, or 8-1. 81 is also the gematria of Bradley Kirk Arnold. Francis Scott Key lived for 23,173 days. Key would have been 173 years old when Christopher Reeve was born, 173 months after the first ever Superman comic, which came out back in 1938. Reeve's death was also 1,073 weeks before the election of the first American Pope, and his last name, Reeve, equals 173 with prime numbers. In fact, last year's Superman movie came out 1,703 weeks after the comic book The Death of Superman. So 173, all connecting to the Bible and the crucifixion of Jesus. A perfect number for a man who was very open about his faith. So this year, the Super Bowl was held in San Francisco and technically Santa Clara, but both cities sit on the 122nd Western Meridian. The city of San Francisco happens to have ordinal gematria of 122. And the city is the original home of the Satanic Church. Satanic and the number 666 both equal 122. We will talk a lot about how the number of the beast is important to this story. Pope Francis and Papa Francisco both equal 122. Well, now we get a new pope named Francis, Robert Francis Prevost. And Robert Francis Prevost was born on September 14th, which is perfect because September 14th is the same day that Francis Scott Key wrote the Star-Spangled Banner, which would later become the national anthem. So Brad Arnold was born 1,202 weeks after Pope Leo. That's interesting because 1202 is the birthday of the man who sang the national anthem at the Super Bowl, Charlie Puth, born on December 2nd. Arnold died 122 days after Yale's October 9th anniversary. And notice how the last guy who played Superman, Corenswet, has this 122 gematria. What really clued me in about this riddle to begin with is that if you measure from the death of Christopher Reeve all the way to the death of Brad Arnold just this weekend, we find they died 7,790 days apart from one another. 779 is the Latin value of the Star-Spangled Banner. And the man who wrote the Star-Spangled Banner was born in the year 1779. His name, Francis Key, equals 1779 with square numbers. In the standard cipher, Francis Key sums to 984, and Christopher Reeve died exactly 984 sidereal months, or lunar orbits, after the adoption of the Star-Spangled Banner as the national anthem back in 1931. In that same standard method, the National Anthem sums to 918. Brad Arnold died a span of 9 months and 18 days after the most recent Pope, Pope Francis, who shares a name with Francis Scott Key. Notice how the song Kryptonite has matching 918 Sumerian Gematria with Jesuit order. But when the Pope passed away, Brad Arnold was 558 months old. That's the Latin Gematria of the National Anthem. And then again, Arnold dies 9 months, 18 days later. So the Gematria of the National Anthem, very important. And in truth, this is all a Jesuit riddle. When Francis became the Pope in 2013, Brad was exactly 1,798 weeks old. In this square number cipher that we just looked at, the phrase human sacrifice equals 1798. Also in squares, sacrifice equals 927. This brings us back to the date September 27th, which is not only the founding date of the Jesuits, but also the birthday of Brad Arnold. Bradley Kirk Arnold was from the state of Mississippi, both sharing 279 Gematria with the Jesuit order, just like the date, the 27th of September. The man who sang the National Anthem, which equals 279, Charles Otto Puth, both 279. So this means Brad Arnold was born exactly 438 years after the founding of the Jesuits. It's worth noting that Christopher Reeve died exactly 4 years and 38 weeks after the release of the song Kryptonite. The number 438 has matching 1698 Gematria with Society of Jesus. And look at this, Kryptonite was released 1,698 days after Christopher Reeve's paralysis. It was also 16,198 days after the birth of the first American Pope. So this is pretty good evidence, I would say, that the song Kryptonite, which came out while Reeve was in a wheelchair, was released on a very special day. So 438 years is also 5,256 months, and 52 and 56, that's the Gematria of the word Pope. Pope also equals 25 and 11. And Leo became the Pope 25 years, 110 days after the song Kryptonite came out. Brad Arnold was born in the year 78. This is another important number to the Jesuits. Jesuit and Jesuit order both equals 78. Cancer equals 708. Like Skull and Bones and Human Sacrifice, 780. Christopher Reeve was born 7,878 days after the adoption of the National Anthem, which sums to 78. This year, the National Anthem was sung by Charles Otto Puth, which equals 78. And the actor in Superman from last year was born on July 8th, or 7/8. David Cornswet was born 177 months after Brad Arnold, like the Jesuit order in ordinal. Our favorite Skull and Bones numbers also sum to this 177. It's also worth pointing out that the Jesuit order is now 485 years old. That's the gematria of human sacrifice and sacrifice. Brad Arnold was born 485 months after the first ever Superman comic was published. So very clearly, a riddle connected to the Jesuit order and their motto, Ad Maiorem Dei Gloriam, through the number 173. It's almost too perfect. Now, the name Francis also gives us this special gematria of 119, just like the home of the Catholic Church, the Vatican, which equals 119. Well, the band Three Doors Down also equals 119. Of course, also 47, like Arnold's age. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But the 119 stands out because a lot of Christians actually believe that Jesus was born on the 11th of September, or 11/9. Brad Arnold was born 101,160 days after Yale was founded. This gives you the same 6 digits in the 9/11 attacks flipped upside down. Again, Yale University founded all the way back in 1701. Brad Arnold was 1,111 weeks and 6 days old when Kryptonite came out. His band is from Escatawpa, Mississippi, which is not only a cool name to say, but also sums to 1161, matching the name Puth. Last year's Superman actor was born 9 months, 11 days after Arnold's birthday, and Corn Sweat was 11,691 days for his starring role. So it does appear as if the 9/11 code is very important here. But when we're talking about the Brotherhood of Death, we need to talk about the number of the beast, 666. The song Kryptonite was released on January 18th of 2000. Measuring from that date to Yale University's special Skull and Bones anniversary in 2023, you get a span of 8,666 days. Star-Spangled Banner has gematria of 666 in Latin gematria. Its author, Francis Key, sums to 666 in Sumerian. Also 66 and 60 in reduction. This brings us back to Jesus, the Son of God. The magic square of the sun sums to 666. 666 sums to the same 3 digits found in Jesus Christ, 275 and 1275. Well, as I mentioned at the top of the video, Brad Arnold died during Brown Lunation 1275. Last year's Superman movie came out 1 year, 275 days after Yale's 322nd birthday. It was also 12,275 days after Charlie Puth was born, and Puth was born 275 days after the adoption of the National Anthem date, March 3rd. When Pope Leo was elected, Brad Arnold was 17,025 days old, and then he died 275 days later. In fact, their hit single Kryptonite came out 275 days after the debut of Superman. Last year's Superman flick was released 275 days after the date of Christopher Reeve's death. And when Christopher Reeve died, he was 2,715 weeks old. The same 4 digits in Jesus Christ. 666 is the 36th triangular number. Notice how the name Brad Arnold has matching 360 gematria with Jesus the Messiah. Sam Darnold was born exactly 36 weeks after Brad Darnold's birthday. Brad was 18 years old when Sam was born. Again, the winning quarterback in the Super Bowl, which was just one day after the death of Brad Arnold. Well, 18 is the sum of 6 plus 6 plus 6. And again, Bradley Kirk Arnold, 180 and 108. From Escatapa, which equals 180. Bradley Kirk Arnold was even 180 months older than Charlie Kirk. Again, the National Anthem equals 180. When Charlie Kirk founded Turning Point USA, Sam Darnold was exactly 180 months old. And that date, June 5th, is 180 days before Charlie Puth's birthday. Kryptonite released on the 18th day of the year. The new Superman actor has a lot of connections to 216, which is the product of 6 times 6 times 6. In Latin gematria, Brad Arnold's full name sums to 816, which matches the beast in Sumerian. In standard, the word beast equals 308, and this was an important number to the Super Bowl. First, notice how it's been 30 years and 8 months since Christopher Reeve fell off of his horse. Arnold died on the 38th day of the year, which is a huge number for death, killing, and murder. In the Super Bowl this year, Sam Darnold threw 38 passes. And check out the name Sam Darnold equals 38 in reduction and standard. Arnold also a 38. And Brad Arnold was 15 years old when he wrote Kryptonite. And I thought it was interesting that they mentioned that he was 15 years old when he wrote this song. Because Sam Darnold was exactly 15 years old when Turning Point USA was founded. And don't forget, Turning Point USA gave us the alternate halftime show to the Bad Bunny performance. Charlie equals 38. And check out how Charlie Puth was born the 38th prime number of lunar phases, exactly after Brad Arnold. Now, another number connected to the beast is 47. In fact, it's Revelation 4:7 where the 4 beasts are first described. Revelation written by John, which also equals 47, like beast. Quarterback Sam Darnold has matching 47 reduction gematria with the band 3 Doors Down. The group's singer died at the age of 47. He was even born 47 years after the National Anthem was adopted. Kryptonite was released when Christopher Reeve was 47 years old, and Reeve was born 40,070 days after the death of Francis Scott Key. 47, also a huge number for the Pope, which equals 47 in multiple ciphers. Francis equals 47, just like Vatican as well. The 47th prime number is 211, matching killing, ritual human sacrifice, and the number 666. Brad Arnold was born 2,110 weeks after the first Superman comic was published And then he died 211 days after the last Superman movie hit theaters. The name Francis Key equals 211, and Francis Key wrote the Star-Spangled Banner 211 years ago. Singer Charlie Puth signed his first record deal in the year 2011. There's probably a connection to Ellen in here. Well, Charlie Puth was 12,211 days when Leo became the Pope. A couple more 211 connections with Sam Darnold. Also with Christopher Reeve dying at 19,008 days of old. That matches both Beast and Jesus Christ. Next up, we need to talk about the Skull and Bones Code. As Brad Arnold died 245 days before Yale's anniversary, matching Skull and Bones Society. When Charlie Kirk was assassinated last year, Brad Arnold was exactly 2,450 weeks old. As it turns out, the paralysis and subsequent passing of Christopher Reeve was all synced up to this code as well. We start with the fact that Christopher Reeve was born a span of 5,275 days after the first Superman comic was published. Last year's Superman film was released 1,572 weeks after his accident. Skull and Bones equals 572, or 527 with the ampersand. Well, 527, or May 27th, was the date of Christopher Reeve's horse injury. This reminds us of the fact that Daniel Jones, who played for the Colts, one of the NFL's horse teams, he ruptured his Achilles earlier this year in a season-ending injury. And Daniel Jones was also born on May 27th, the anniversary of that accident. Reeve would go on to die 26,885 days after the National Anthem was adopted. 885, a huge skull and crossbones number. If you measure from his death to the first Superman comic, you also get 282 in the measurement. Yale was founded on the 282nd day of the year, like Brotherhood of Death in Gematria. And now we get the death of Brad Arnold, whose name equals 282, syncing up with Charles Otto Puth, another 282. But of course, when we talk about Skull and Bones, it's really all about the numbers 223 and 322. Skull and Crossbones, 223, right? In the alphabetic order. And look how perfect this all is. Brad Arnold was born during Christopher Reeve's 322nd lunar phase. And Arnold turned 322 lunar phases one day before Reeve died. Again, a lunar phase, simply a measurement from each new moon to new moon. When Three Doors Down released the song Kryptonite, not only was it 3 months and 22 days after Arnold's birthday, but it was also 3,222 weeks after the first Superman comic. It was also 322 days after March 3rd, the adoption date of the National Anthem. Pope Leo was born 322 days before the birthday of Francis Scott Key. Key wrote the Star-Spangled Banner 322 days before his birthday. Charlie Puth, 33 years, 22 weeks, and 3 days old when Leo was elected as Pope. And now Brad Arnold has died 322 lunar phases after the release of Kryptonite. But get this. His death was also 312 months and 20 days after the release of that single. Born 312 months and 2 days after Christopher Reeve, who died when Arnold was exactly 312 months and 2 weeks old. When Superman was first published in 1938, it was 31,220 days before Yale turned 322 in 2023. I mean, just look at this. It all comes together way too well, doesn't it? But of course there's more, because this special phrase, skull and crossbones, equals 263. So does Order of the Skull and Bones. So does Masonic. Brad Arnold was born a span of 26 years and 3 days after Christopher Reeve. He was 263 lunations old when Kryptonite came out, and then he died exactly 26 years and 3 weeks later. Superman first hit the presses 2,603 days after the National Anthem was adopted. Skull and Bones formed in December of 1832, 20,603 days after Independence Day. But 263 is also connected to this horse code. Remember I just mentioned the Colts quarterback, Daniel Jones? Notice how Colts equals 263. And Brad Arnold died a span of 263 days after the owner of the Indianapolis Colts, Jim Irsay. The word horse equals 263. Also, if you write out Brad Arnold from 3 Doors Down, you get this other 263. Well, 263 is the 56th prime number. Christopher Reeve fell off his horse on a date with 56 numerology. This syncs up with the Jesuit order and the Pope 56. Superman 506, just like his real name Kal-El, which is 56. 3 Doors Down Kryptonite has the 560. A number that also connects to David Corenswet and Charlie Puth. Charlie Puth sang the National Anthem on a date with 56 numerology. Skull and Bones also equals 76, and there's a lot of 76 when you measure from the Jesuit anniversary and founding date to the birth and death of Brad Arnold, the release of his song Kryptonite, and last year's Superman film. All of these posts you can find linked down below in the description if you want to see more, but the last big code I want to talk about in this video is one of my favorites, the 1331 Eclipse code, as this has not been more evident in a mainstream news story in a very long time. And first, I just want to mention the guy who sang the National Anthem, Charlie Puth. His name sums to 724 in standard Gematria, and this is a very important number that points to all of this. Great American Eclipse equals 724, just like the Brotherhood of Death. Jesuits, also 724. Excuse me. Jesuits, also 724, matching number of the beast. And this is essentially the number that points to this Skull and Bones Eclipse code, right? Skull and Bones Eclipse has Gematria of 322, while the Star-Spangled Banner equals 223. Now, for those of you familiar with my work, you may know by now that 1331 is truly, undoubtedly, indisputably, the ultimate eclipse number. Check out the links in the description for my post on this from several years ago. Now, Brad Arnold dies exactly 1,113 weeks after Christopher Reeve. Why is this significant? Well, 1113 is not a prime number. Instead, it is a composite number. And the 1113th composite number is 1331. Notice how Christopher Reeve's full name matches 1331 in Gematria. And here we are in the year 2026. 1331 has matching 226 Gematria with sacrifice. So to truly understand this, we need to understand the number 13 at first. Rather intriguingly, the band 3 Doors Down equals 130 in the alphabetic order, which matches Skull and Bones. Freemasonry and Total Eclipse both have this value in Latin ordinal. Remember when Leo became the Pope last year, it was exactly 13 months after the second Great American Eclipse, and a span of 130 days before his birthday. 3 Doors Down, Kryptonite, Jesuits, even that number 438, all with this 1-3 Gematria. Human sacrifice and ritual human sacrifice both connect to the number 13 as well. But what brings this together is the fact that the 13th Fibonacci number is 233. And when you write out the numbers 13 and 1331, they both equal 233. Not only did Brad Arnold die a span of 233 days before his next birthday, but it was also 2 years, 3 months, and 30 days after Yale's Skull and Bones date. With capital letters, Brad Arnold, 3 Doors Down, and Kryptonite all equal 233. The last pope, Jorge Bergoglio, has matching 233 Gematria with horse. The first Great American Eclipse even happened on August 21st, which is the 233rd day of the year. And isn't it fascinating that Jesus the Messiah equals both 233 and 1331? The only date on the calendar that sums to 1331 is November 30th, which just so happens to be the date of the only total eclipse in 1331. 1331 eclipse with that same value. The first two numbers with this gematria in Latin are 133 and 331. Brad Arnold was born on a date with primary numerology of 133. And not only did he die 133 days after his last birthday, but it was also 33 weeks and 1 day before his next birthday. The most recent Superman actor was 30 years, 3 months, and 1 day old for Yale's Skull and Bones anniversary. Francis Scott Key lived for 3,310 weeks. The only other number with 1331 gematria in this cipher is 393. And look at this. Brad Arnold died 3,093 days after the first Great American Eclipse. .331 is the 67th prime number. Notice how Brad Arnold has matching 670 gematria with Christopher Reeve's full name. Well, Brad Arnold died 670 days after the second Great American Eclipse. Total solar eclipse, human sacrifice, and blood sacrifice, all 67. His death was also 6 months and 7 days after Francis Scott Key's birthday. Yale's special anniversary was exactly 6 years and 7 weeks after the first Great American Eclipse. "133 days is also 19 weeks. This means Arnold died exactly 19 weeks after his birthday. And this is perfect because not only does Superman equal 109 and 133, but the letter S is the 19th letter of the alphabet. The big S on the chest of Superman. The 19th card of the tarot is the Sun, which also begins with the letter S. Solar eclipse equals 190 in reverse. Arnold's death was a span of 190 days after Francis Key's birthday. And isn't it interesting that Christopher Reeve died 190 years after the Star-Spangled Banner was written, and then died a span of exactly 19 years before Yale's Skull and Bones date? In the alphabetic order, Star-Spangled Banner and the United States both equal 190. And the guy who sang the national anthem at the Super Bowl, he was born 22,190 days after the national anthem became official. The number 1331 is also special to Sam Darnold, the winning quarterback. He was born 1,331 days after Charlie Kirk. And Sam was 31 months and 13 days old when Kryptonite came out. 1331 sums to 1889 in Gematria. And maybe I'm wrong with this, but I thought Jesus the Messiah might have an 889 somewhere. Yeah, no, I'm tripping. We do get the 485, though, which I mentioned earlier. Forgot to point that out. Anyway, Sam Darnold was born 18 years, 8 months, and 9 days after Brad Arnold, matching 1331. The new pope was 1,889 weeks old when Charlie Puth was born as well. So, yeah, the further you drill down, the deeper it goes, the more you find. I also have another post pointing out the pi and circle riddle, which normally I love to talk about, but it all feels a little bit redundant. I think I've covered enough in this video. I did fail to mention this. You know, we have this big Charlie Puth, Charlie Kirk, Bradley Kirk Arnold connection. Arnold to Darnold, right? This all makes way too much sense, I think. The Super Bowl and Brad Arnold's death were both 151 days after the assassination of Charlie Kirk. That's another huge number for Jesus Christ and Jesus the Messiah. The National Anthem was adopted 151 years after Key was born and 151 days before his birthday. Charlie Puth was 1 year, 316 days older than Charlie Kirk. And 1316 is such a significant number to Jesus. I mean, just look at this. Jesus Christ, Yeshua, Yahweh, return of Jesus, Jesus Christ, second coming, Jesus, second coming. All of this sums to 1316. So if you saw my video on Charlie Kirk, you would have known it was a huge church riddle. The last name Kirk literally means church. He was shot essentially across the street from a new Mormon temple. So yeah, again, there's more in my posts if you want to check this out. Just a lot of random notes I thought were worth putting together. But once again, this is all a massive riddle connected to the Jesuit order, the first Jesuit Pope, Francis, the other Francis who replaced him, and the Francis that wrote the National Anthem. last month, I did a video on this car crash of Anthony Joshua. And in that video, you notice I put Francis Scott Key and the American flag in the thumbnail. So what we looked at today is essentially an extension of the same riddle. Anthony Joshua's crash, let's see. Yeah, it was December 29th. So it was 41 days later. And who wrote the national anthem? It was Key. Key equals 41, just like USA. USA, the big 41. Skull and Bones, 41 reduction. So once again, it all comes together way too well. But that'll do it for this video, everyone. As always, check the links in the description for more. If you'd like to support the work, become a member at gematrinator.com. But this is me signing off. Peace, love, God bless, and we'll talk to y'all next time. See ya.